We live in a great society, and the way that we educate, nurture, and protect our children is one of the most important responsibilities we have. We know that sex offenders are constantly seeking opportunities to access children. That's why it's so important that each of us understands the dynamics of sex offending and the warning signs that can be identified. What you're about to see may be confronting, but through the stories of child safety experts and survivors of abuse, you'll learn about the behaviour patterns of child sex offenders. And through the testimonies of convicted perpetrators, you'll gain an understanding of the methods they use to target, groom, and isolate children. By understanding these tactics and behaviours of offenders, you are much more likely to identify the warning signs and thereby help to prevent child sexual abuse from occurring.
Child sex offenders can be anybody. We know that about 95% of child sex offenders are male, but obviously that means 5% are female. We also know from the Royal Commission that a large proportion of sex offenders are adolescents in institutional settings. There is no typical profile of a sex offender.
Child sex offenders are a very diverse group. They're a group of people who are quite opportunistic in their offending against children and adults actually. So it would be a situation where they actually can offend. You know, they have access, it's children they are able to actually spend some time with and abuse. So that's one group, they're just opportunistic. There's another group of people who think about it a bit and they access children they can access. So often they'll access their own children or children they come across within their daily life. And there's a third group who are the group we'd call pedophiles, who really do plan it. This is what they do.
My experience in investigating sexual offences against children is that it's very common for the offender and the victim to be known to each other.
So it started when I was 3 and there were 5 perpetrators. I was a part of an institution that meant I had a lot of people around me. My mum and my dad had a lot of friends, they worked very hard. So the people that surrounded me were very good family friends, so I knew them. Some of them were very important, I guess, people or connected to very important people in the institution. So they, for me as a child, they were seen as trustworthy, important people that, you know, were known to my family.
Sex offenders commit sex offences for a range of reasons. Typically, a number of different factors need to align for an offence to occur, some of which are inherent to the offender, whilst others relate to the setting around them and the accessibility to a potential victim. Some of the offender-related factors can include problems relating to other adults, inability to form relationships and have their needs met that way, emotional identification with children, and of course seeking to meet their sexual needs inappropriately.
Sex offenders, first of all, will identify a target. They're usually vulnerable. They will then work to gain the trust of the people around that child. They may spend a lot of time actually developing the trust of the people around them and the child.
None of us leave our kids easily with people who we think are suspicious. So it requires people to be very good at making themselves either indispensable or useful or charming, any number of those things.
I had a good government job, I was respected in the community, and it became easy to form friendships with a family, and if there was a child within that family who fitted into my target age group, which was teenage boys going about 12, 13 years of age, then I would get interested in that child, offer to take the child away on trips, various activities like that, and then the grooming and the targeting would start.
Offending is a planned process. Much time and energy goes into planning, targeting, and accessing children, and creating the right environment for the abuse to occur. This framework, developed through the Corrections Victoria's sex offender programs, is used to understand the process that child sex offenders typically follow. The first phase, preparation, looks at how the initial thoughts and feelings lead to abuse occurring. The cycle often begins with the offender experiencing negative or sometimes positive thoughts and feelings in a range of situations. These may be old familiar feelings or new ones.
I could have went straight out and gotten a public phone and rang somebody in my support group. I didn't. I felt outraged, I felt indignant, all the old feelings came back over the years. I guess in a way I was so far gone in my mind physically and mentally that if I knew that what I was doing was wrong, I didn't care, because if I went to jail, who cares? I'm no good. I went back into the self-pity trip of I belong in jail, I'll never be any better, I'll never be any different, and I allowed it, what happened to happen, and sure as hell I got caught and went back to jail.
The offender will then start engaging in pro-offending thinking as they try to convince themselves that sexually abusing a child will not harm anyone and will help make them feel better.
Offenders also undergo a cognitive process whereby they minimise and justify their actions, reconceptualising them as being mutually beneficial and not harmful to the victim.
Many offenders, and offenders you'll see on this DVD, talk about that how the child is coming onto them or the child is attracted to them. That's a method used by many sex offenders to try to validate their behaviour or minimise the impact that they're having on the child.
Well, I just justify I'm not doing anything wrong. I mean, you know, I justify that it's just something sexual two of us are doing together. I mean, it's not wrong, and you know, it's okay. They like it. They don't mind doing it.
I mean, a 15-year-old boy that walks up to an adult man with long hair and garishly dressed the way I was, smoking a cigarette, rather flamboyant in appearance, I saw in my drug-befuddled mind that he was coming on to me.
The offender indulges in fantasies of what they would like to do and rehearses the offence in their minds. The fantasies may include words, thoughts and feelings, as well as pictures, with the aim of creating arousal to feel good. Continually replaying and rehearsing the fantasy makes it seem like a normal thing to do, and also increases feelings and sensations of arousal.
The fantasies probably started as early as 14 or 15 years of age. The actual grooming and targeting started in my early 20s, and it was when I was about 24 years of age that I actually started offending.
Once the offender has made the decision to sexually abuse the child, they enter the second phase of the abuse cycle, interaction. Targeting is the first part of the interaction phase, whereby the offender selects a potential victim. They will be doing their own research to find the easiest places to sexually offend and get away with it.
I have volunteered my services to organisations that look after street kids and underprivileged and homeless and da-da-da-da as an art and crafts instructor, and I know today that I have offered my services as a form of meeting people and forming relationships and for my sexual gratification.
Offenders will target vulnerable children. It's often children with low self-esteem. It's sometimes loners, children who don't play easily with other children, so they're often on their own. There's certain kids you just know they don't go for, which are the really loud, very sort of aggressive, chatty kids who are going to tell anybody anything all the time. So, you know, they know who to pick. They pick children who are less likely to tell, more likely to be compliant.
If you say, oh, I'm going up the shop, would you like to come? Well, you know, we have an ice cream, and they don't hesitate and they go with you. I think then you know in your mind he's going to be easy to groom He's the type of person who's not likely to tell anyone. The ones that are hesitant, the ones that come from a good family, they've got a good, reasonable education, their parents take a lot of interest in them, they're the ones I avoid at all costs, because they're not going to come with you for a start, and they know straight from the start that something's not right. But a lot of kids who don't get that love at home, and an adult is taking an interest in them, that's when they will allow certain things because they want to hang on to that friendship. And they don't realise this person is only using them, manipulating and abusing them for their own gratification.
Grooming. This can be a long and involved process where the offender aims to build a trusting relationship with the potential victim, as well as the child's family and the organisation. The grooming process could take months or even years. The offender may use bribery, rewards, paying special attention to individual children, being helpful, or even isolating children to achieve their goal.
The types of techniques they use to groom the child is to fill a void in the child's life. They may buy them things, give them special gifts. They'll spend time with them individually to make them feel special.
He proceeded every 6 months or so to call my house and to inquire how I was going, and he seemed a very genuine person.
Once in them organisation is similar to any offender. Where they groom, they might take one aside, give him extra treats or give him an ice cream and get to know him, get to know his parents, get to know his school, how he goes at school, you know, and say, oh, you need a hand with your homework, I'll give you a hand, don't hesitate to call or come around. And normally most offenders will get the victim alone. They won't do it, but part of the grooming is to get them alone. Like, oh, this is where I live, if you want a hand with your homework or you want your bike fixed, come around to my place. And that's when the offence is most likely to occur.
I'd start sexualising the conversation to a small degree, and then a little more, and then a little more. And then I'd start getting a bit physical with the person, you know, simple hug, and then it would develop from there. If at any time I detected anything in the way of any resistance at all, I would stop.
Just giving them a cuddle is a grooming, because you're grooming to see what their reaction and response will be to your touch. Then, you know, you often say, I'll bath them, I'll give them a bath, and, you know, so virtually you're offending all the way through. It's from the start, that could be over a 3 or 4 or 5 hour period, you make excuses like I've got to go to the toilet, but you go up to the bedroom, and you don't just go up to the bedroom, you know exactly what you're doing. You go into that bedroom to offend.
The sexual offence itself occurs once the offender feels confident that they can commit the abuse without getting caught and without the child disclosing. They may start with milder forms of abuse, such as touching, and then progress to more extreme penetrative forms of abuse.
The boy who was going to become a victim, I would invite him away, and eventually I would invite him away without his family. And of course that then gave me the opportunity to have the boy alone, and that's where the offending would start. And by the time I'd offended against them, it was often about 3 years later. So they developed a good friendship in me. They thought they knew me well, they trusted me.
The urges used to get stronger as each victim. It wasn't, I wouldn't want one victim, I want 2 victims in the one day. Then I want 3.
After the offence has occurred, the final phase of the cycle, silence. Offenders may experience guilt and fear, the intensity of which varies depending on the frequency and the experience of the individual offenders. At this stage, there might be the fear of getting caught and some feelings of guilt. The offender uses denial to minimise the impact of those feelings and to enable him or her to re-offend.
When the offending is finished, I see him as a person, but not. If I seen him as a person from the start, I probably wouldn't offend. I only see him as a sex object, something for my gratification. And when my gratification's fulfilled, I go into a different stage about feeling more guilt. I have a lot of guilt in my life about what I do, but that's never stopped me.
Offenders go to great lengths before and after the abuse to maintain secrecy and ensure the victim does not disclose it to anyone. Children don't speak up for lots of reasons. The offender may reward the victim, use bribery, coercion, blackmail, or even threaten the victim to ensure they keep the abuse a secret. Sometimes offenders may not even need to do anything because they have convinced or confused the victim that sexual abuse is normal.
One of the key methods of operation for child sex offenders is around secrecy. They'll often ask the child to keep it a secret, and often if children are vulnerable, they actually don't even have to be told not to tell. They just won't tell.
I would tell them things like, don't mention what's happening. I will probably get the sack. If you tell any of your mates that you're coming to my place to do artwork and it gets back to the people that I'm working for, the class will dissolve and the other guys will blame you. So I sort of shouldered a great deal of responsibility onto the person that I was grooming to be very secretive about his behaviour and his visitations with me.
Parent control is one of the biggest tools that an offender uses. He uses it firstly to develop a level of authority, possibly, over the child. He uses it to develop a friendship. He uses it to disempower the child.
Well, I suppose what I was concerned for my parents' sake, that if they'd known what had occurred, that it could have destroyed my parents' lives, and I was willing to take that on board myself at that stage to not hurt my parents.
The offender needs to maintain a normal profile to reduce any suspicions. They may overcompensate by becoming pillars of the community, so they are above suspicion.
I would go on and basically start pretending that everything was normal, that life was good, that everything was fine, and so I'd use another group of thoughts, put another group of thoughts into the child's mind and also into my own distortions to reinforce that this was okay, that this was fine, when indeed it was wrong.
There is no set time period for this progression. Offenders tell us that it could happen in minutes or take years to actually progress through the whole process. Gradually, though, some of the negative thoughts and feelings will return and the cycle continues. This is essential information for parents, carers and organisations to use to ensure that children in their care are not targeted by child sex offenders. Despite the myths, child sex offenders can be anyone. There are no stereotypes.
Child sex offenders, they're normal people. They could be any occupation. They can be anyone who in normal life looks a completely normal, well-adjusted, happy person.
The vast majority of offenders who sexually abuse children are people known and trusted within a family, organisation or community.
It's a very high percentage. Some 80% of children are actually assaulted by people who are either part of their family or certainly part of their friendship network or the friendship network of their family.
Offenders will look for situations and environments where there is a lack of protection of children.
It's important to remember that factors external to offenders relating to the environment around them and their access to children also need to be present for an offence to occur.
Offending is a planned process and seldom a result of a single decision or action.
Sex offenders take a very planned and targeted approach. That's one of the reasons why we advocate that organisations, parents, teachers also need to take a planned and targeted approach to stopping sex offenders from entering into their children's lives.
So listen to your instincts. There will be reasons why you are doubtful or alarmed by someone's attitude, actions or inactions.
I was over-friendly towards the children, to the point of, hugging, cuddling. That should have alerted someone that something's not right.
I not only told people I didn't want to go with certain people, but I also shied away from certain individuals, which, I think would have put a red flag up and thought, well, that seems a bit odd that particular person, she really doesn't seem to want to go. I think that would have been something that people would have noted.
Abuse occurs in context of secrecy. Children don't speak up for lots of reasons, and the effects of child abuse ripple out, extending into the whole community.
I was probably at that age confused. I didn't think anyone would believe what had occurred to me as well.
Child sex offenders acknowledge that confident children who are aware of protective behaviours and personal safety skills are less likely to be targeted as victims. Children need to know that they have a right to feel safe at all times.
They need to be comfortable with coming to tell you they feel uncomfortable about something, and I think that's important to talk with them about. If you feel uncomfortable about what's happening, you can actually say, no, I don't like that, and walk away.
As adults, we all have a responsibility to protect children and ensure that they are kept safe from harm. If a child makes a disclosure, or if you have any suspicions or concerns that a child might be at risk of abuse, contact the police or child protection immediately.
Police work very closely with other agencies in protecting children, but it is important that we as a community all take on this responsibility.
Don't let your own fears and worries about what might happen if you think it supersede the safety and the love of that child.
There's got to be a lot more protection, and people have to be more vigilant in not ignoring all the signs of distress in a child and trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to help the child to heal.
If you have been impacted by what you have just seen in this video, or if you need advice about a child you believe is at risk, you can call Childwiser's toll-free helpline to speak with a qualified counsellor.